Hello and welcome to zednewsblog-podcast, your go-to commentary on the news as seen from a biblical worldview. In this episode, the 12th in the current series, we will look at what is going on concurrently in a growing number of Southeast Asian countries that are experiencing an upheaval of the masses due to an unprecedented deluge of corruption scandals in their governments, and what these events reveal about the universal condition of man. Within days after his decision to ban social media platforms and the subsequent revelations of corruption within the government, the Nepalese parliament building was burned by a riotous mob and Nepal's prime minister was forced out of office. In the Philippines, in rapid succession, the Senate president, who's been implicated in a grand scandal involving flood control infrastructure projects, was forced to give up his leadership position, followed by the sacking of a cabinet secretary along with just about all high-ranking bureaucrats in his department. Most significant of all, the vice president of the nation was herself impeached by Congress over charges of culpable violation of the Constitution, betrayal of public trust, graft and corruption, and other high crimes. Meanwhile, in Indonesia, several officials were targeted by the public over the people's frustration with political elites as ordinary Indonesians struggle with government austerity, scarce job opportunities, and the threat of mass layoffs. As a consequence, the ministers of finance and security were removed from their posts by President Subianto, even as houses of government officials in various locations around the country were pillaged and burned by protesters. Sadly, about 20 people have died in the unrest. There is no question that the most notorious socio-political issue that has historically brought down many regimes, sparked revolutions, and caused governments to collapse is the issue of corruption. In the case of the Philippines, where our commentary is focused on, no one saw it coming, at least not at this time in the nation's history. The rising and touted to be soon the Southeast Asia's economic powerhouse finds itself suddenly reeling from the impact of a massive scandal of corruption that threatens not just a widespread fallout among politicians, civil servants, legislators, and the contracting industry, but the general stability of the country as a whole. The number and size of protests grow by the day as masses of people from far places and near Manila converge in the capital to vent their anger and to demand the immediate prosecution and punishment of those who stole billions of dollars worth of taxpayers' money. As the extent of the abuses become known, the intensity of the commotion also rises. So is the danger of assassination of whistleblowers and potential state witnesses. What stoked the Filipino people's reaction particularly was a recent expose on television of an extremely lavish lifestyle of a big-time contractor couple who showed off their imposing multi-level mansion filled with a la Getty Museum art collections, with an adjacent multi-level indoor garage that houses, among others, some 40 luxury cars like Rolls-Royce, Maserati, Bentley, etc. Different social media platforms have not helped their cause either, as those only heightened the public's fury over reels of Nipo babies and Nipo wives from the word nepotism, or children and spouses of alleged corrupt contractors and legislators who shamelessly flaunted and bragged about their, again, alleged ill-gotten wealth. Despite attempts in the past to weed out this social cancer, corruption in the halls of the Philippine government has become so pervasive today. The systemic anomaly seemed to have reached the zenith because those entrusted with the responsibility to enact, to regulate, and enforce, and monitor the abundant anti-graft and corruption laws are alleged to be the leading culprits themselves. In the ongoing proceedings of the Blue Ribbon Committee in the Senate, it has been demonstrated that, as an example, out of the approved budget that's earmarked for a typical flood prevention project, after kickbacks and other anomalies, only about 30% or less is left to cover the actual implementation cost. That accounts for the substandard quality of dikes and other flood mitigating structures. Hence, many such projects were doomed to fall, resulting in yearly deaths and extensive destruction of property all around the country. According to a local city mayor's anatomy of corruption, the allocation is typically divvied up as follows: 40% kickback for politicians, 15% contractor, 10% implementing agency, 30% actual project, and 5% others. As I have alluded to earlier, at the center of the epic scandal is the close to $5 billion allocated to flood control projects in the Department of Public Works and Highways, much of which have been questionably awarded and ended up as non-existent or ghost projects. Worse, in the ongoing scrutiny in both the Philippine Senate and House of Representatives, a number of legislators, including the previously mentioned Senate President and Speaker of the House, themselves are being exposed as complicit in a grand collusion of corruption through the so-called insertion of projects in the national budget, in connivance with officials in the implementing agency and with contractors, some of whom happen to be some of the investigating congressmen themselves or members of their own families. Consequently, even as the legislators continue to cite instances of irregularity by some of their colleagues, some have preemptively left the country. I should add that in the ongoing public scrutiny, apart from the notorious Department of Public Works and Highways, similar allegations of massive corruption are being reported as rampant among the Department of Education, Philippine Health Institute, Commission on Audit, Bureau of Customs, Department of Tourism, etc. All told, the amount of money in question is simply too staggering to put a finger on. Yet, none of these unfolding fast-paced events happened without warning. No less than the President himself, Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr., pronounced a stinging rebuke against unnamed corrupt government officials during his State of the Nation address last July 28, 2025. In that speech, he announced that during his inspection of some of the areas devastated by flood during a recent succession of typhoons, he was saddened to discover that much of the recurring calamities could and should have been prevented by structures that the government funded over the years to be built. Seeing in person these places still remaining flooded to this day, Marcos said that his sadness over the plight of the people turned to anger when he realized that many of these projects failed because they were either incomplete or of substandard quality. Worse, many more that were reported to have been built and fully paid, amounting to billions of dollars, actually were not built at all. As a result, President Marcos ordered a full report on all projects in the entire country, and he promised to prosecute and hold accountable all who will be found guilty, regardless of position, personal relation, or party affiliation, so he declared. Just like the wars in Gaza and Ukraine, this developing story will take some time to disappear. But just like the armed conflicts, it would be wise for the serious observer of history to rise above his fascination over the events themselves and look deep at the root cause of the problem. Perchance he may learn a lesson or two and become a better person and a positive influence to others. I therefore submit that in the analysis of the Philippines case, and for that matter of Indonesia's and Nepal's too, And surely we should also include Malaysia, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka, where similar things are going on. One should go past the unending list of speculative social, political, and scientific theories and face the reality of what is fundamentally wrong with man. As the saying goes, all roads lead to Rome. Quite clearly, then, what we see here is greed. But that is not the problem. Rather, greed is merely a symptom of a very serious disease. That disease is lust. Lust for gold, for power, for fame, and for comfort. All fleeting, just like life itself. Cause of the disease is none other than our inherent corrupt nature, otherwise called sin. The Bible teaches us that truth, and no honest individual can deny that reality. In other words, all of us, without exception, are corrupt. The tragedy is that no matter how much we try, we may succeed perhaps only in changing our views or understanding of our condition, but we just cannot change our nature. That is the bad news. The good news is that there is a way, Jesus Christ, not his teaching, not any religion that bears his name, his person only. When we acknowledge our corrupt condition and put our trust on what he did on our behalf, he will change us by giving us, among others, a new nature and a new heart. Along with it, the ability to fight successfully the tendency to do corrupt practices, as our focus will then be on things that have eternal value, or things not of this world but of heaven. That is what the gospel or good news is really all about. That is our hope, the hope of every person, the hope of every nation, and the hope of the whole world. In 2 Corinthians 5:17 it says, "Therefore, if any man is in Christ, he is a new creation. The old has passed away. Behold, the new has come." Thank you for watching. Blessings to you and yours.